Okay, so I'm going to download this university crime data for today. Here we go. Justice, I am recording. I think so. Let me double check. Yep, I think we're good. I think I am recording. I'm going to download this university crime data. And as a reminder, this is the data that we will be using for the database modification project. So again, we're becoming a little bit more familiar with the data for that project, which is, as a reminder, a pretty big project. I'm going to unblock my file, and then I'll open it up and see what we got here. Okay, so here we have some data, some crime data as we've seen before. And let's put this into a pivot table. But before we do that, let me describe a little bit of this data. So we're still trying to get just get familiar with this data. What is this 5,128 number mean right here? As we look at this data, what does this mean right there? Any ideas, suggestions, guesses? What's that code? Total enrollment. Yeah, but it's interesting to note that this value, like all of this information pertains just to this value, right? So this is enrollment. It's information type of data. It's not crime data. It's just information for a specific campus at Auburn University. So apparently there's more than one campus, and Montgomery campus in the year 2006, there was 5,128. The next, what is it, 8 rows is talking about the crime specifically for the Montgomery campus at Auburn for 2006 even, right? That gets to be pretty specific labeling for these numbers. So let's make a pivot table. What we're going to do here, high level, is we're going to make a pivot table. We're going to get it to where we want it to be, and then we're going to delete it, and then we're going to record a macro creating this pivot table that we want, and then we're going to go in and edit that macro code. So pivot table macros, the code for those are a little bit specific. There's some pretty good editing that you have to do to make pivot table code reusable. So that's what we're going to do today. And we're going to be able to reuse code to create pivot tables, which is kind of cool. Okay, so let's create a pivot table. I'll just come up to the Insert tab, click on Pivot Table, Table Range. It's selected all the data. New worksheet is fine. I'll click OK. And here is our pivot table. I'll click on Values, drag that down to Values. We're probably most definitely going to need that. What does this number mean, by the way? Does this number have any significance? Not really, no. Yeah, there's so many different things that go in. This is crime number as well as enrollment number, right? I mean, it kind of doesn't mean, if I drag labels down here to rows, that breaks it out a little bit more. So here's our original number of, what is that, 30 million? It looks like 30.4 million is pure enrollment. And then everything else is some number on crime. But even this 30 million is an interesting number. What does that number mean? Yeah, is it 2006? From the data, yeah. Right? I mean, if we didn't know, what is the last year here? We have 2006 down to 2010. So this is 4 separate years of data, which implies what? It implies there's some overlap here, right? If we're thinking about this from a college perspective, let's say it's 30 million enrollment, but that's got to include the same person over multiple years, right? Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of overlap in this number. So we kind of have to be careful about what this data is. So let's break this down a little bit more. Kind of what I think would be helpful. Let's move our labels over to the columns. And let's move down state and school and campus into the rows. And then instead of kind of just expanding all of this, let's right click on one of these universities and let's do collapse entire field. And then we'll right click on a state and we'll say collapse entire field. That way we can see the states here in our pivot table. And it's just by default, it collapses it, right? So if we wanted to come and look at Utah, by the way, why is Idaho not in here? Or because there's no crime in Idaho, which is not true. Right? On a college campus. Yeah, this was, well, it's 2006, 2010 data, but this is all voluntary reporting to the FBI. So apparently Idaho did not make any reports to the FBI for those years. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I know, right? Utah's in here, and we can compare some of the crime here from different Utah schools. Oh, which by the way, I forgot. Let's put report year in here. Let's do year. Let's put year and filter. That way we can just filter for 1 year. So if we wanted to do 2006, what was the enrollment for Utah State? 14,000. Oh, is that all? Is that all in Utah State? That seems low. I thought Utah State was high. Yeah, that seems low. 2000. I mean, that's almost 20 years ago. Yeah, I'm curious. What's Utah State for 2010 enrollment? Is that higher or lower? Okay, it's inching up, 15,000 in about 5 years. Interesting. Yeah, I think it's bigger. We can come to Wyoming. Anybody have any Wyoming connections here? Or North New Mexico? No. Virginia. What's in Virginia? Where's my alma mater? University of North Carolina, UNC, baby. Go Heels. 56,000. That's what I'm talking about. Chapel Hill's at 28. Greensboro, that's massive. Greensboro's bigger than UNC Greensboro is bigger than Utah State. Take that. But if you guys want to know what the party school is, you guys don't want to know, do you? Never mind. Arizona State. BYU Idaho. Let's assume for purposes of comparison, let's make this our default chart. We'll come in here, we'll do 2006. And let's open up Utah and Wyoming. And let's do New Mexico. How about that? Eastern New Mexico. They don't even have the University of New Mexico. That's all right. I'm not complaining. So let's consider this kind of the default pivot table that we basically want to reproduce, right, in the code. And you can imagine a scenario if you're working for a company and you as an intern have the responsibility to send out a weekly report, a weekly pivot table, so that people on your team can manipulate the data. This might be helpful if somebody on your team isn't comfortable creating a pivot table or isn't comfortable, doing all those things. And sometimes you can create a pivot table outside of Excel using a data source from a database directly and pulling that into Excel. And some people just may not be familiar with that. So let's assume that for this scenario, we want to create a pivot table from code and send out this pivot table to anybody on the team. And then once the pivot table is created, they can go in and make any changes that they want, right? But we want to give them a default, here is this pivot table. And we want to automate the creation of this pivot table. So we don't have to spend time making this pivot table every week. We can automate this pivot table and send it out. right? That's kind of the scenario. You can if you want to. Yeah, we'll leave them on for now. But yeah, you could do more pivot table, more customizations. Absolutely. There's a lot more to customize in a pivot table. Okay, great. So now that we have, I think what we want here, I'm going to go ahead and delete this, but we have report year here, label here, state school campus, sum of value. This is a pretty good basic default. So I'm going to delete this and I'm going to recreate this, but I'm going to record a macro when I recreate this. So I'll delete this sheet. And by the way, another reason why I'm deleting this is because behind every pivot table is a pivot cache. And those are two different objects, kind of like how we did with the other day when we had charts and objects, right? We were creating a shape on an Excel sheet, and within that shape, putting the chart on the shape. It turns out that there's a pivot cache, and the table pulls from the pivot cache. Reason why Microsoft did this is they can have one pivot cache where you can create multiple pivot tables off of that one pivot cache. And so we're going to look at that today. But it's very similar to this idea of a shape and a chart, where there's really two different objects that we're dealing with. Here, it's a pivot cache and a pivot table. And you can have multiple pivot tables that are connected to the same pivot cache. So, okay, I've deleted this. Now I'm ready to go ahead and record a macro. I'll come up to developer, record macros. Let's call this build pivot. And we'll do Control-Shift-T for pivot table. How about that? I don't know if we'll use that very much, but we'll put in a shortcut key, sure. We'll save it in this workbook, and then we're going to create it. So I'm selecting in this, I've already selected this cell here, just selecting where in the data, and I'll come to the insert, and I'll do a pivot table, and I'll click OK. It'll create a new sheet. And let's add the fields back. We have value, we have label. Let's do.
Got too fast.
Sorry, was that too fast?
Yes, 10 miles per hour.
10 miles an hour. Yeah, build pivot. You can create your own macro name, whatever you want to name it. Wait, which project? User forms? Oh, like right now? No, I don't want to take away the fun from it. Chris. They expand all the way. Yeah, if you right click on it and do collapse all fields. In fact, I'll do that in a second once we're all caught up here. Should I go back?
Yeah.
You want me to go back one more time? You want me to stop recording, restart the whole thing?
Yeah. Just a little slower.
A little slower. Okay. No worries. Okay, let me stop this. Let me delete this. I mean, sometimes I guess I just get really excited and I kind of just want to zoom through this.
You think we're all as smart as you are, but we're not.
Oh, no, you guys are smarter. You are smarter than me. Okay, so let me start from scratch here. I've got no macro recorded. I've got no pivot table. So, okay, so now we're going to record a macro. Does that sound good? Okay, here we go. Record a macro. I'll name it build, what do we say? Pivot table? Build pivot. I'll do a shortcut key. Again, I don't know if I'll use it, but I'll go ahead and put it in. I'll click OK. And nothing happened. Oh, it's recording. Sorry. For some reason, I thought I was creating a pivot table. Build pivot threw me off, I guess. Okay, so now we're recording. Great, perfect. Now I'll come up to insert and I'll click on pivot table. because I'm already selected on this data, right? So it's going to select this data. It's going to realize, okay, you want this table and range? Yes, I do. New worksheet? Yes, I do. And I'll click OK. So we've got a pivot table here. And now we're going to fill the pivot table like we had before. We good? Got it. Okay. So I'll take value, drag that down. Value to values, right? This is all the numbers. That gives us that 30 million, which isn't really meaningful at all. I'll grab the labels. Put them in columns. Thanks, Jared. Yes, each one of those is an individual person or an individual crime or both. Victim. Wow. This is turning this is much more ethical lesson than I thought I was going to have. Okay, we got label. Let's do school, campus, no, state, school, and campus. So I'll do state and I'll do school underneath state and I'll do campus underneath school. And last but not least, I'll include the report year in the filters section. And before I stop recording, I'll do a little bit of formatting like Chris suggested. Let's do this. Let me go to, let me right click on Alabama State University and I'll go to expand collapse. Which one is it? Collapse entire field right there. So I right clicked on Alabama State University. I went to expand collapse option and then clicked on collapse entire field. And that will collapse all of the universities, all the schools. And then I'll right click on Alabama and do the same thing. Expand collapse, collapse entire field. And if I do that for the states, now I have the states here and I can go back in. I can open this up and I can go back in. But it's all kind of collapsed at this point. So let's do this. Let's open up, by default, let's open up Utah, Wyoming, and New Mexico. New Mexico? I don't want to open up New Mexico. North Carolina. California. We're going to do North Carolina. Good old alma mater. Okay, at this point, I think it actually recorded all my scrolling. We'll take that out. I'll go ahead and click stop recording because I'm still recording.
Utah, Wyoming, North Carolina.
Utah, Wyoming, North Carolina. Yeah, we can set the year filter. That's a good idea before I stop recording. Set to oh, you already stopped. Okay, I'll stop. It's fine. I'll just stop. It's fine. I'll stop. We won't really use the report year filter that much. Okay, I'll stop recording. Yeah. Yeah, let me stop recording. And if I stop recording, I think what you're saying, are you saying, can you come over here and sort this based on grand total? Yeah. Right. I came over here and I just sorted over here whichever I wanted. It's a little bit weird because if you have these subcategories, you have to sort those individually, if that makes sense. But yeah, you can sort that. Yeah. No, but that's a great idea. No, that's a great idea. Hadn't even thought about it. Did not even, but that kind of, I mean, Hunter and Garrett, that's a great point, right? Any other customizations or any kind of sorting, we could build that into the VBA and it would do it. I mean, boom. That's exactly right. Boom. Okay, great. So let's see where do we come out here? Let me go back to my Visual Basic. Let me pull up this recorded macro. And let's see what we have. This I mean, this looks pretty intimidating. There's a lot of code here. There's some parts of it that we're just going to get rid of. There's other parts that we're going to change. Let's see. One of the things that I want to talk real briefly, just kind of highlight real briefly, is if I come up here to the immediate window and I type in this workbook dot pivot caches. So in this workbook that I'm in, there's a sub-object called pivot caches. You can see that here in the code. A pivot cache is basically a data source. It's basically that's probably not the best word for it. It's basically a repository of data. It's a single repository of data where multiple tables can be built from. And it saves memory and it saves space. So there's a lot of good reasons to do it. But let's count. So what we can do is we can say this workbook dot pivot caches dot count. And that says there's one pivot cache in this workbook. Can I count? Let me fact. Does this let me count pivot tables? Pivot tables. There it is. So pivot tables is another version of this. How many pivot tables do I have? Yeah, I wonder if that's an array. I wonder if that counts as an array. I don't know about that. I'll have to go do more research on that one. But we know there's a pivot cache count of 1. And let's look at some of this code. So what do we need to do to this code to make it so that we can automate this pivot table report, right? Let's take this out. We don't need this. Application.cutCopy mode, false. We'll take it out. The next line, sheets.add. Okay, this is interesting. We're going to add a sheet. In fact, if I were to run this sub right now, again, it would give me an error because it would try to create a pivot table in sheet 3. It actually tried to create a pivot table where there's already a pivot table. R3C1, row 3, column 1. It would give me an error. Say, no, something's already there. It's going to error out. So when we create a sheet, we probably need to identify that sheet, right? Grab the reference to that sheet and put it in a sheet object so that we can understand and we can use that sheet. So let's create a couple of variables here. We'll come up here, we'll do dim, and let's create a worksheet variable, worksheet object. Dim WS as worksheet. And when we create this sheet down here, let's say set WS is equal to sheets.add. So when we add a sheet, we're going to grab the reference to that sheet and store it into this object, WS object. And then we have this code right here. So let's look at this code right here. This is doing a lot here. We have active workbook. I mentioned this last time, I think, maybe before. I tend not to use active workbook or active sheet because if the user changes something or clicks on something while the code's running, it could mess up the whole thing, right? So instead of active workbook, let's change this to this workbook. And it's referring to dot pivot caches, which is this cache of data. And then it's saying dot create. So it's actually creating the pivot cache right here. And here are the what do you call these? Parameters. These are the parameters for this pivot cache. We have a source type. This is coming out of Excel. It's saying this is an Excel-based data. The source data is in this tab and in this location. We're probably going to want to change that, right? Because I don't know. Maybe we don't change it. Maybe we assume that that's the same. Let's do this. Let's change this to. I'll take this out, including the quote marks. Let's change this to whatever the name of our sheet is. What's our sheet name? Let's use the code name for our sheet, which is data, right? If I come up here and I do data.name It's saying crime data. That's the name of the sheet. So let's change this to data dot. And have we talked about this before? Used range as a method of the data sheet. So if we do data.useRange here, it's going to identify that all the used range, all the cells that have information in them is part of that used range. We want that to be our source data. Let me scroll up a little bit so you guys can see a little better. What else needs to change? So we've created the pivot cache from this data. Pivot table, yeah, very good. This is where we're creating the pivot table. How about that? So let's do this. Let's separate these objects out, shall we? Let's come back up here to dim, and after the worksheet, let's do dim pivot cache PC as a pivot cache. That's actually an object. Let's dim PT as pivot table. And so we're going to capture these two objects separately from this statement. So if we were to break this statement up, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create. Let me pull this up here, combine it on one line. Let me expand this out a little bit so you can see what that looks like. So this first line, I've said this workbook dot pivot caches dot create, and these are all the parameters to create that pivot cache. We've changed this data dot use range in our source data, and that's the only change we've made inside of these parentheses. And let's set this to the object we just created. So set pivot cache equal to this line. Now that we have the pivot cache, we can say set PT equal to pivot table. So we're going to create a pivot table. So let's bring this back up here. Erase some of this line so that our dot create pivot table is right here. But what I can use now that PC is created, I can come here and put PC right in front of that. Set PT equal to PC, this pivot cache. From that cache, create this pivot table. And let me delete some lines here. So this becomes one line. Where's the destination? Where should we put this destination? Yeah, very good, right? We added a worksheet. Why don't we put it on that one? Let's do, let's take this sheet name out. We know what our worksheet object is, so we can actually say WS dot range, and we'll just say A3. Go ahead and put it in A3, because that's where we put this pivot table, was in A3. Okay, very cool. Oh yeah, sure. Here, let me take these out. Let me see that gives us more room. There we go. How's that? Yeah, good question. Okay, I have an error. Why do I have an error? It's a subtle but small thing. It turns out that because when we create this pivot table, we're capturing the reference to this and putting it into this variable that we need to add parentheses. It's one of those weird things. Took me years to figure that out. If you guys figure that out before the end of this class, I'll be very impressed. So the parentheses are needed here because we're capturing the reference to the table that we just created. This pivot table we just created. We're saying if you want to send that reference somewhere, you need parentheses to send it to this PT object. So we needed the parentheses there. Okay, so now we're pretty good, except for this. Let me do one more step and then we'll do a neighbor check here. Here's the reality. If there's a pivot cache that already exists in the workbook, we don't want to create another pivot cache. We want to stick with the pivot cache that we have. So let's add an if statement. And let's go like this. If this workbook dot pivot caches dot count is equal to 0, then do something. Else, do something else, and then end the if. So if the pivot cache's count is 0, that means there's no pivot cache. That's when we want to create one, right? So I'm going to move this line, this pivot cache line, and I'm going to put it inside of this if statement right there. If there's no caches, then create one. How about that? This is going to help us avoid the situation of creating multiple pivot caches. But if the pivot cache already exists, then we're going to set PC equal to this workbook dot pivot caches dot item 1. How about that? We're not going to create anything. We're just going to set it equal to the pivot cache that already exists. Sorry, let me scroll down a little bit so you can see it better. So here's that if statement. If there's already exists a pivot cache, if the pivot cache is 0, if there's no pivot cache, then create one. Else, just attach it to the one that exists. We could do some more fancy stuff and say if it's the right pivot cache. We're going to assume that in this particular workbook, if there's a pivot cache, it's the right one we want to use. Do you know what I mean? We're just kind of assuming that here, which is a safe assumption. Okay, but now that we've done that, notice that we haven't created our pivot cache until this point. And so we actually need to move our pivot table creation to below the table. So I'm just going to move where we create the pivot table to below the if statement. And we have a pivot table. Okay, so let's test this out. I'm going to put a stop in here. And let's see if we can get this far. Ready? So if I just run this, you think it'll work? Boom. If I run this, it created a new sheet and it created a new pivot table based on the same pivot cache. So if I go back up here and I just drag my yellow arrow up and I do F8, it recognized that the count was not 0. And so it skipped that line. It goes into this and attaches to that pivot cache currently. So we know that that looks good. Okay, neighbor check. Did you get it, neighbor? How close are you? Where are you at? Neighbor, help me out. Neighbor. Am I my neighbor's keeper? Isn't that a scripture? A random question? I like random.
I just tried debugging and I got an error. But I don't, this is all like from a different row. It was already in there when I downloaded it. What does that mean?
I'm not sure. If you don't, wait a minute.
I like this all is weird.
Yeah, it is weird. You scroll down. Oh, it's on view. Is the option to
Sorry, brother.
is it a capital V? Is that a capital V or lowercase v?
That's a
Yeah, it's not recognizing that. That's really weird.
I just keep putting in the errors after errors.
Is it the same file? Is this the same file as this? Or do you have multiple files open?
Oh, that's a different file. What the freak? Wait, no, that's the same file. Wait. Huh? Yeah. Huh? Yeah. This one's different. What is this one? I only have one open.
Yeah, you might have to close your Excel all the way down. Close it all, like close all Excel files and see if that helps. I don't have a better answer than that right now. Nothing to see here. Keep moving forward. Okay, great. How's it coming?
We're stuck.
Crashed and burned?
Not quite yet. We lost the wheel.
How far did you get?
I got this part, and then I'm pretty sure this is the right piece right here.
Yeah, it looks great.
And then when I go to run it, it tells me to do the stop.
Well, it worked until the stop, right? That's what we were just testing. Did you get a couple? You got a couple more sheets there with tables, right? If you go back to your Excel sheet, I think it's working. The wheel is on, Garrett. The wheel is not off. Yours work? We're able to find WS. Oh, is that WS right there or WE? It looks like a WE to me.
Oh,
At
it's
the top,
it's a-
dim WS.
Oh yeah, up top. Up top.
Right there.
Yeah. You put
Yeah, yeah.
I missed a couple of stuff. I think I was too slow.
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Okay, let's see. We got our dim, we got our set. You're adding this, you're setting the PC, pivot cache, create. Nice. Set PC. Okay, so you're setting PC twice.
Oh, I have to delete one.
Yeah, delete this and bring that line up. No, no, let me think. No, you're creating a pivot table here. That's different than a pivot cache. Hold on to that. You want to pull this pivot cache inside to underneath the if statement.
This one.
Nope, the one above it.
This one.
Nope, the one above it.
Okay.
Nope, the one above it. Yep, that one. Grab that,
Let me see. If I tap E again, I have
put it underneath. Yep, right there.
right here.
Perfect.
How would I know?
And so that's only going to create it because it's creating right there, dot create pivot cache, if there's no pivot cache right now. So if the count is 0, then it's going to create the pivot cache. Else, you're going to attach it to that.
Okay.
So that's good. Now, in between here, you want to put this red stuff in between there.
All the red stuff.
Both lines. Yep.
That means it is that.
Take that out, put it underneath. Yep, right there. Perfect. Paste it. Perfect. And then combine it. So go up to this. Yep. And then delete that underscore. Perfect. Paste it right there. Beautiful. So instead of PC, do set PT because you're doing a pivot table. Because you have a PT.
I have to
You
say
created a
PT.
PT. Correct.
Yeah. You what? PT.
Nice. And before the period, put PC
For the period.
right there. Right before.
Here.
That's it. Do PC. So you're saying referencing the pivot cache that you've just created, create a pivot table from that pivot cache. And in the destination here, take out the double quotes and the double quotes. Take that. Yeah. Type in WS because that's your worksheet up here. WS dot
WS dot
and then do range.
range.
Open parentheses. Oh, open parentheses and then a quote. Open parentheses and then double quote.
Parenthesis, this one, right?
No, that's quote.
Parenthesis.
Parentheses, yeah. And then quote,
Quote.
double quote, just what you had, double quote, yeah. And then A3 in between those quotes. Yeah, in between the quotes. Yep, there you go.
Mhm.
And then close parentheses, yeah. Perfect. That's it. Run that. See what you get. Oh, you got red?
Yeah, I got it right, I think.
Oh, you need parentheses. So open parentheses before the table destination,
Okay.
Yeah. and then a closed parentheses over here.
Go by here.
Yep, and then that should work. Run that, see what happens. How we doing?
Got it.
Got it? Got it. Chris? We good?
Yep.
We good? Man, you're good, Brennan. One will be so. Did you get it? Nice, Carter. Nice. Wow, great job. Okay, so now what do we do? Well, let's look at some of this other code here. Where does that leave us off here? So what we do is we've not bad, right? Already we've created a new sheet. We've created a new pivot table. Now we got to add the data to the pivot table. So let's do that. We don't need this. We'll take out the selection because we're already working on that sheet. I don't need this select because we're already on that sheet. This code right here, this next chunk of code within this with construction, all of this down to here, is really standard settings. It's really just standard settings, right? The macro recorder is recording all of the standard configuration for a pivot table. And I'm probably okay with all of this. Probably what I'll do is I'll probably open up like a notepad file. Oh, is a notepad on here? That's pretty cool. I'll just open up the regular notepad file and I'll just copy it in here. Just in case if I really do want to come back and use it later, I have it. Otherwise, I really don't think I need it. So I'm just going to cut it from here. It's going to stop my project, which is fine. Come over here and I'm just going to paste it in here. This is where code goes to die, right? At the notepad. But if I want to resurrect this code, it's an easier to resurrect it to bring it back if I have it right there. I probably won't use it, but if I want to, I could. Okay, these are all just basic settings. What do we have next? With this one, okay, we should start to see here, right? We're referring to pivot cache. So one of the things I could do here is I could replace this with the object that I set up, PC, right? I could replace all of that. Isn't that cool? This says active sheet pivot tables, pivot table 3, pivot cache. I've already created a pivot cache object and it's right there. So I can start to replace a lot of this code with the object that I created. Actually, as I look at this now, I don't think I want this one either. So I'm just going to take this one out and put it in my notepad as well. This is just more default setting stuff. So I'll cut that, put it over here. So now I'm here. And now's where we're starting to add some values and add some data, right? For example, this is talking about repeat all levels or labels. So let's keep this one. So this is referring to a pivot table, active sheet.pivot tables pivot 3. I can replace this part with PT. PT.repeat all labels, XL repeat labels. And that's based on the object that we created. Exactly. If I go back, active sheet.pivot tables, mine's pivot table 3, yours might have a different number, but I'm going to replace all of this part right here with the object that I created up above, which is just PT. It's going to refer to that pivot table, that specific pivot table that I created right here. Okay, so this is where we're going to do some of the same things, basically, actually. We're going to start to replace a lot of this reference to the active sheet pivot table to PT. So here's another one, active sheet.pivot tables. I can do PT. And this is where we're adding a data field. And let me pull this up here to the top line so I can see this in one line. PT.add data field, active sheet pivot tables P3. I can do PT again here. How about that? 2 PTs in one line. PT add data field, PT.pivot fields value. Right? This is the name of, that's talking about the actual name of this field. It's called value. So it's saying pull that value, put it into the pivot fields. Question?
Yeah, I think I'm tripping. Where did you get all that?
This is still on that macro that I recorded originally.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that.
Oh, you didn't record this part.
Well, I didn't.
It's just gone.
Yeah, I think I'm tripping.
Did you accidentally put it into your notepad?
It might be a line or two.
It might be farther down. Is it? Did you have another module too that you recorded in? Because you might have recorded a second module or something.
No, I don't have that one model. I'm just trying to find where it says like with the active sheet, dot pivot table. But I'm not seeing it.
Okay, it's possible you didn't record it, this was just the dragging down. Right, when I was creating this pivot table, in fact, I can go back here. It's like the act of taking this and dragging it down here. That's what that line did.
Okay.
So that dragging right there should have created this line right there in your code
Okay.
on the recording. If you don't have it, you can just type it in. Okay, so here we have this PT. We've replaced PT with that specific PT. We've got repeat all labels. This is where we start to add the data to the pivot table. We have add data field. I'm adding value. Notice, by the way, this title right here, sum of value, that's like the A3 range value right there. I can come in here. Let's say I wanted to change that to university crime. That's going to change what this says at the pivot table. It's like giving the pivot table a new caption right there. It's kind of nice. Next we have label. And what we can do here is, let me just comment this field out, and let me just type it once. And we'll be doing this a couple more times with the state, school, and campus. We're going to say pt dot pivot fields add. In this case, we're going to add our label field. And the orientation, which is where we want to add it, it's going to be in the column field. And so basically, I took this line of code and I condensed it down to this line. Does that make sense? That's where I got. I'm not just making this up. I'm saying, here's my pivot table reference. I'm saying for this pivot field's label, I want you to put that in the column field. So this line of code is as if I took this pivot table and I grabbed this label and I put it right there in the columns field. That's what that is, right? That one line of code says, grab the label field, put it in the columns. Question?
How do you comment the whole?
Oh, multiple lines?
Yeah.
Yeah, good question. There's a toolbar up here, and it's called the is it over here? I think you have to select it to bring it up. I want to say, let's see, toolbars. Go to view toolbars, and I think it's the edit one. You can also go to, where is it? Yeah, good question. I feel like there's somewhere else you can go to do that, but I can't remember where it's at. But up here in this toolbar, you have a comment and uncomment a block. So, which is kind of nice, right? I can select these 4 lines and I can uncomment or comment it out. Okay, great, great question. Another question, Will. Mostly just to change the caption in the table, right? So if I create a table, sum of value is like the default name. And so I'm just trying to be a little more descriptive. It doesn't have any impact on the numbers or calculations or anything else, just a little more descriptive title. That's all it is, yeah. Okay, so we've got this one. We've got this label. Let's do the same thing for state here. I'll comment this out. And let's do pt dot pivot fields. And this is going to be state. And we want that orientation to be XL row field. So this is the Excel row field. We're adding state. And let's do it again for school. So I'll comment these lines out. I can just copy this down here. And instead of state, I will do school orientation Excel row field. And I can do this one more time for campus. Comment this out for campus. Come down here. Paste this in, except instead of state, I will type in campus. And then one last time for the report year. I'll comment out report year. Come in here, do pt.pivot fields report year dot orientation equals, and notice this is a different orientation. Excel page field is the orientation on that one. Okay, so now let's try this. I'll take out my stop up here, remove the stop from here, and put my stop underneath my report year. And let's run this and see how we do. Ready? Let me go ahead and delete. Oh, sorry, here's the code. In fact, let me see if I can shrink this down so I can get more on the screen here. Let me do this, this. So work with your neighbor. Make sure you guys have the right orientations for each of these fields. First one was the value field, Excel sum. We want that to be summed up. Next one was the label field in the column, state in the row, school in the row, campus in the row, and report year in the page field. So double check those, make sure you got those in the right spot. And if you're really brave, you can delete your other sheets that you've already created here. Delete them all so that just the crime data tab is left, and run this code and see what happens. We should see the table. We haven't collapsed anything, but we should see states, campuses, and schools there. We should have this kind of output. You know what? Maybe it's more helpful if I do this. I take this guy. Pushes it up a little. Yeah, sure. Okay, we got like 2 more big steps and then we're done. How's it coming? Anybody got this far? Neighbor, did you check your neighbor? Nice. No? How close are you?
Thought it was exact. Since saying this line's giving
Pivot
me.
tables orientation, Excel column field. Oh, I think you misspelled orientation.
Did I see it? Did I spell orientation?
It wasn't you, Brian. It was somebody else. ORI. Yeah.
That's right. That was it. Debug. Did I? Okay, right. I got this.
Orientation.
I'm just gonna make sure it's correct. What?
let's see, you set your PT, right? Yeah, set PT equals that. Add field values to crime Excel sum. PT pivot fields.
It's supposed to be pivot fields or pivot something else.
Yeah, this pivot table goes inside that PT. This pivot fields is this one right there. Dot orientation. See what the Excel is that right? Excel column field.
So
Why don't you stop it and run the whole thing over again?
stop. Right.
Because I don't see a sheet here anymore.
Well, I
So-
deleted them all.
Oh yeah. Well yeah, why don't you stop it and run the whole thing over? That's probably the problem. Okay, there's your pivot table. Yeah, orientation. I think you misspelled orientation.
What the heck is going on? Why is it mixed up?
Yeah, check that one too. And that one.
Is it just a
I think that was it. I think you misspelled label. Label.
what's E?
Yeah. No worries. Beautiful. Nice.
Do we need to delete this part right here that we had? I think I can make this one bigger.
Yeah, it is small. You should change your font size. Go to
What?
tools at the top, and then go to options. Yes. And then go to editor format tab. And then change your size to like, I don't know, what do you have? 18,
I
20?
think this came default. Like this one. Much better. That's a lot better.
Yeah.
So I have what I call
Orientation, so roughly you got the state.
states. Yeah,
So
and then
value.
I have so I don't think I have that school. I don't know about this one.
Scroll. You can take the scroll out.
This one out?
Let's see. Wait a minute. What's this one? This one is talking about your value. You already got the value, right?
Yeah.
So you can take that one out. Right. Yeah, yeah.
Then we have I have the state.
You got the state, you got the label, the school, campus,
Then it's
report year. Now the report year is going to be not the row field, but the page field.
Page field.
Yeah, so change row to page. ROW to page. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
And then put a stop underneath that and run that. See if that works. Yeah, right there.
So
Okay, that's a good sign. Went to that stop. That's good. Hit play one more time. See if it goes all the way down to the other stop. Hey, look at you. Okay, now check your Excel. See if it's working on your Excel. There it is. There's a pivot table. That's perfect. That looks good.
look at that.
Did you get it?
Yeah, we got it. What am I missing?
Let's see what happens when you run it. Great, it goes to there. And then does it go down to the next stop? Do you have another stop right there? Yeah, hit play one more time. Okay, hit debug. And let's look at pivot tables. Pivot table 18 University crime. Let's listen. Oh, I think you have to delete all your other sheets first and then run it. Hit stop up there. And then go down to your Excel.
It's kind of fun if you.
And then just not that one. Where's the file?
Sorry.
Yeah, no worries. You want to save that first?
Yeah, I have to. Okay, here.
Yeah, so delete these three sheets, 2, 3, and 4. Just right click and delete them and then see if it runs. Yeah. Yeah, keep your crime data.
No, so it's I blocked out these guys.
Right.
What was I blocked? So I found it. It was
Nice.
and all that. So I just crossed that off.
Sure.
What was supposed to go for this?
Before
Was there anything supposed to go for this?
state?
Who's winning?
Yeah. So like, I have this.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, there's like one or two lines like value. Let me scroll up.
I'm trying to find that.
Yeah, you're like really close. I think it's like a couple lines. Still in work? Carter? Wasn't it? You see, add data field. You can see the tables. The table 18 admission crime. So some- Four.
Is it good or bad? Because I am behind. Okay, it's page build, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, report, that should be report year, report space year.
Where?
After report right there.
Report.
Space.
Yeah.
Nope, inside the quotes.
Oh, okay, the code. Okay. Good morning.
Yeah. Space. That's it.
Uh-huh.
Let's see. But that wasn't the error message, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let me run here.
Object doesn't support this property. Oh, wait a minute. So that should be the second line, the pt dot add data field, which you got.
This one,
pt dot pivot fields. Oh yeah, this should be
column. Wait. Oh, label, I don't have that one. I don't have the
user group. That should be pivot fields right here, not pivot tables.
pivot field.
Pivot fields, and then do value.
Wait, pivot fields.
See what's up there? Try that line, see if that works. Did you get it?
Yes.
Nice.
So if we run it, this is object required, and it says this, and it applies that, so.
pt pivot field state represents a row field.
What? Try page field, not page.
That looks right. Why don't you stop it? Run the whole thing one more time. Is that the same error message you get?
Yeah. So subject.
Looks right.
Well, never mind.
Wait, what
There it goes, it ran it fine that time. The fact that I showed it to you is like, no.
You can try to delete those 3 sheets
Yeah.
and see if it runs again. It looks good.
Yeah, that's what the.
It looks good.
Everything worked well until that one line. We couldn't figure out what was going
How's it coming?
Got it.
Nice. Sure.
Deleted all of them, we write it.
Oh, the first time? Mostly just to avoid all the extra code that we would have had in the macro recorded if we were trying to figure it out.
No, I mean like we recorded it, right? But then we just deleted all these lines and then just wrote our own.
Yeah.
Why couldn't we just
maybe
write
it's
our
too
own in
much.
the first place?
Maybe that would have been easier. Yeah, good point. Probably faster that way too.
Maybe it's learning.
Maybe it is. Brandon, you good?
We just
Okay, great. I think we're generally there. Oh, good. Let's finish 2 more steps and then we'll be done. 2 more big steps, I guess. Okay, so the last couple of things here is we've got the data in. Let's go ahead and collapse everything, and then we'll open up those three states, and we'll be done. So I'm going to come back to my stop, my bottom stop here. I'll go ahead and stop it. Stop the stop. And let's go through this data. So what stuff do we need to keep? I don't need to keep the select. We're not selecting anything at this point. Show detail false. This is the one that says collapse everything. So we're going to collapse the school. But again, I don't need to reference the active sheet here. I can say PT. That's the pivot table. Dot pivot to fields school show detail equals false. And that's it. Beautiful. I'll take out the select underneath that. And here we're going to collapse the state. So I'll take this part, refer to the pivot table there, collapse the state. I don't need the scroll down or the select. I'll take this out. And then here, I'm saying expand Utah. That's what this is saying, right? So I can come here and I can replace this part with PT again. pt.pivot field state.pivot Utah. Show detail true. So I can come over here, put this up on one line. That's kind of just my own preference. You could keep it at 2 lines, but I kind of prefer it to be 1 line. Then I did some scrolling and selecting. I'll take that out. And I expanded Wyoming. So I'll come over here and I do PT here. And I'll bring this up to 1 line. Pivot item Wyoming true. So here is my collapse of school and state, these lines right there. Here is my expanding of Utah and Wyoming, and I think, oh yeah, North Carolina. Let's expand North Carolina too. Here's PT. North Carolina, show detail true, and I can take out my active scroll, and that's it, my friends. How about that? Should I scroll up?
Yeah.
Oh, go back up to the top. Good question. What could we put? Go up. I don't know. Maybe this one. Would this work? Should we try it? Yes. Yeah, if you recorded a macro filtering on a pivot table, for example, you could most likely put that in here. Absolutely. And you would reference that pivot table, right? PT, and then all the filter commands that go with it. Yeah.
Paradox.
You can do sorting, you can do filtering. Anything you can do with a pivot table, you can do in code. Isn't that great? You guys are prepared to be the ultimate interns that this school's ever seen, this program has ever seen. You guys are in position to excel more than any other student generation before you. Excel and excel. How's that feel? No pressure? No pressure? You guys got this. And for those of you that are graduating, you're going to be managers like within a year. You can start out as a manager. You're not going to have to go to grad school in 3 years. You're just going to keep working. They're not going to want you to leave their business. They're going to raise your salary so high, you're going to be like, oh, I can't afford to go to grad school right now. The opportunity cost is too high. Okay, so let's see if this works. I'll go ahead and delete my previous pivot table here, start from scratch. Here is my crime data. And let me go ahead and comment out my stop. Do I have any other stops up here? No. Maybe delete some spacing here. And let's run this puppy. And there we go. There's my North Carolina, Utah, Wyoming. Woo! You guys feel that power? Can you feel the power as it goes from your fingers to the, I mean, as long, like the time it takes you to click on play on that sub is how long it takes to create this pivot table. Power. Power. It's crazy. All right, that's all I got. I'm going to end class a little bit early if that's okay with you guys, and call it good. And happy to stick around for any questions or comments that you might have with anything coming up. So.
The previous class, the
461. Oh, yeah? The midterm exam. We're done for today in this class, yes. Do you have any questions or comments? Happy to help out.
Just
Oh.
reminding you, I won't be.
All next week, right?
I'll keep up with that.
Okay. I'm not gonna stress unless you win nationals.
I'm just getting curious.
You tell Meredith,
Oh, man.
you tell Meredith she has to win nationals.
No, she might. I mean, BYU actually has a good reputation because they're a four-year school and all the others are two.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Well, most.
Oh, okay.
But I'll see.
Sure.
So I ran into another problem.
Sure.
I was trying to submit it to see, because I got some new code, right?
Yeah.
And this is what happened every time I submit it.
Subscription out of range.
And so I
That's
press
in there
it,
at 9. Yeah.
and it stays on this page.
Oh, no. And let's see, that's Atlas.
Yeah.
Is that an Atlas add-in issue?
Because it's literally worked, everything has worked until now.
Yeah,
Now,
maybe it
this won't
is.
pull up, this won't pull up. I figured out what the.
Things are getting
error
worse.
was.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it was because down here at the bottom, let me show you. Down here at the bottom, volunteer had an S in it and all the code had no S's. So
Interesting.
you just had
Okay.
to take out the S.
Wow,
So I
interesting.
figured that out.
Kind of surprising. Good work.
Yeah. I just don't know what's.
Go to your add-ins. Where's your add-ins? It's there.
My brother said I could use his computer while he's at work
Oh,
tonight,
do you?
so
Okay.
he doesn't have a Mac, so I'm gonna see if I can
Oh,
figure
good.
out how to get it to work on his.
Oh, perfect.
But I'll still come tomorrow.
Okay, great. I'll plan on it.
Help.
Sure, sure. That sounds great.
I just what's going on.
Yeah, yeah. Me neither. But well, we could probably figure it out.
I just have a question on a project.
Yeah.
So we're not doing anything with Nathan's schedule, right?
Not in the sheet, no.
So we're not writing any code dealing with this just with volunteers.
Pretty sure.
Okay, so this schedule button
Is probably, yeah.
just pulls up this.
Right, right. Just for something else, yeah.
So pretty much the whole idea is just to edit the first name, last name,
Right,
and all this,
right.
and then just be able to.
Error message it, yep.
Do it. Yeah. Hopefully all that.
Right.
I just need to switch these two are mixed up.
Oh, okay.
And that's it. You're just having it, so you just do the selected line,
Yeah, I think that's right.
and the words do show up. Not the numbers.
Uh, I can't remember on that one.
So it's
I
just
have to go back and check.
I'm just trying.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, that's. So
List box.
On Monday.
Yeah,
Areas of interest. So is that this one right here? Areas of interest shows all values located. Read the values from the sheet so that when changes are made to the sheet, the form shows that's the next thing.
not the. Continuous. So this is just making sure that.
But if you wanted to make a slide in there, I just put in a bunch of highlights.
Cancel button.
Right.
No, so I like texted it. Well, yeah.
Stay okay with all that.
Show up
Okay.
there.
I already got the-
Okay, let me
Have you
refresh.
submitted yet?
No.
Okay.
Just
So you do have unlimited submissions. You can submit as many times as you need, yeah. Yeah,
And
I
then-
changed it so for all these assignments, you can do unlimited submissions.
And if you like the assignment,
No, no worries. So, yeah, no, it makes it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could submit 20 times and it'll take the highest. It used to be that it would just take the highest of the first two, but it takes the highest of all submissions.
okay, sweet.
So you can do as many as you want, which is actually really helpful from a learning perspective, I feel like, because it details out.
Better than trying to.
Right, right. Trying to get it the first time.
I
Yeah.
got this stuff. I was gonna ask you about the midterm.
Oh, for last class?
Yeah, 'cause I missed. I just want to know. I think
Oh,
it's a
okay.
happy car wash,
Probably is. Hilarious watch.
whatever it's called.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to look at that if there's nobody else has any questions?
I know, but I can wait.
I have that.
Yeah, I can wait.
What was?
It was 100%.
What was it out of? Like.
90 points. was weird because, well, lamb, the scoring on Lamb doesn't, don't pay attention to scoring.
Yeah, I
on
was
Lamb.
like,
No, it's weird score. There's a weird score on Lamb.
see you later. Hey, we'll see ya.
No, it's weird.
But what if the outlook?